I am excited to introduce you to our next presenter, Jan-Emmanuel De Neve, Professor of Economics and Director of Wellbeing Research Centre at the University of Oxford. He's here with us today to discuss how prioritizing employee well-being can transform your workplace and boost your bottom line. After his starting comments, he'll be welcoming up a few special guests to join him in a work well-being panel in a few minutes. So please put your hands together to welcome Jan-Emmanuel to the stage.
Good afternoon, everybody. I cannot tell you just how excited and pleased that I'm here with you today, because we've been working for so long and for so hard to bring to you today the very best evidence the world has ever seen on why workplace well-being matters. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to dig into how we've measured workplace well-being at a scale never seen before, what drives these big differences we're seeing between your organizations, because all of your organizations, or most of you representing organizations, are actually part of the study and the data you're about to see. These are your people's voices you're about to see on the screen. And then finally, how these differences that explain the variation in workplace well-being actually lead to very tangible, concrete, business-relevant outcomes, whether it's retention, recruitment, and even productivity, and how that ultimately leads to an extraordinary business case we've never seen before. And to top it all off, we'll have an extraordinary panel of 3 female leaders who are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and leading well-being within their organizations. And it's not a coincidence that in our crowdsourced ranking of workplace well-being, these 3 corporate leaders are also, their organizations are at the very top of the Work Wellbeing 100. So a lot to cover and very little time, so buckle up and try and stick with me as we move through lots and lots and lots and lots of scientific evidence that hopefully will arm you as you move along back into your own organizations, making the case for investing in workplace well-being. So let's start with, how do we actually measure workplace well-being? Well, there's only one way to find out how people feel, and that's by asking them. And we do so by asking them 4 questions. We start by asking them, well, how happy are you at work? Are you overly stressed at work? Are you satisfied with your job? Are you achieving a sense of purpose or meaning while at work? These 4 items, looked at separately or looked at together, make up the work well-being score. Now, these measures are derived from the OECD guidelines on how to measure general well-being. And these particular items for the well-being outcome indicator are now being picked up by lots of your own major corporate organizations, including S&P Global, who are using this to rate you on your sustainability. And the World Economic Forum is also promoting these particular measures. But what is really going to put a lot of momentum behind these measures and this massive study are our friends at Indeed, who have started crowdsourcing this at a scale never seen before. Most of you will have heard of the company Indeed. They are the world's largest job search engine, which enables us to do this kind of crowdsourcing at a massive scale. Now, joking aside, I have to say it's been the privilege of my professional life to be able to guide and partner up with Indeed and develop and build out the work well-being score in this particular survey, which has now been responded to by over 25 million workers, mostly the US, but also outside the US. And a lot of people in this room represent companies where we have hundreds, if not thousands, of your coworkers who've told us through the Indeed crowdsourcing effort how they feel at work and why. And so while there are some of the things that we're now picking up through this officially the world's largest study in workplace well-being, well, the first result is actually quite a sobering result, which is that only about 1/4 of people report high levels of workplace well-being. So amongst our respondents, only about 22% put a 4 or a 5 down on average across the 4 outcome measures for workplace well-being. Now, When we aggregate this across all of your organizations, we see a huge spread in the distribution. There's companies in this room that are 4 and above on average workplace well-being on a scale from 1 to 5, and there's companies, sadly, who have an average workplace well-being closer to 2. For us economists, we love big variations because that means there's lots to drive and understand and figure out, and also downstream consequences to this. Now, obviously, this begs the question, what explains these differences? And to do and dig a bit deeper, we need to look at the drivers below workplace well-being indicators. So we don't just ask of your teammates whether they're happy, satisfied, leading purposeful work, or too stressed out. We also ask about foundational needs such as, are they being compensated fairly? Do they find the situation trustworthy? Sense of flexibility. Social needs such as appreciation and belonging and inclusion. Growth needs to do with learning, achievement, and feeling energized in the tasks that they do. Now, all of these things, all of these drivers of workplace well-being that can move the needle on how we feel at work matter a great deal, but some matter even more than others. And so what we're finding is that it's not pay or flexibility, which most people would put out on top, that actually is, while important, the most important driver of workplace well-being. No, it is a sense of belonging, something that came up very strongly in the previous discussion on this very stage. Belonging meaning being treated like a human being, bringing your whole self to the workplace, having valuable qualitative social relations, and who knows, even having friends at work. These items, that kind of culture of belonging, is, as it turns out, most strongly correlated with how people feel at work. And it's how they feel at work that will then drive their behaviors around productivity, engagement, retention, and so on and so forth. We're going to be digging into some of these drivers and how to move the needle on those in terms of then, in turn, driving the needle on workplace well-being. We'll be talking about those with the extraordinary panel who are leading by example, and I can't wait to introduce them to you and dig into some of the drivers and the interventions that have worked really well for them, clearly. But this is about the business case, the economics of workplace well-being. So let me get back to that. There are 3 possible reasons why, or 3 pathways to performance as we think of them, that could explain why investing in workplace well-being, or doing well generally in workplace well-being for whatever reason, or however you've been able to raise workplace well-being, how they may end up in your bottom line. These 3 pathways are, first of all, productivity, the classic one. Is a happier worker a more productive one? The second reason might well be, well, if you're a good workplace, you might be more attractive to talent and job seekers, thus getting even better people in the door than you would otherwise. And then finally, the most obvious one of them all, retention. If you're a good workplace and people enjoy and feel good working at your company, they're way more likely to stay. We're going to be showing you some of the extraordinary evidence, the best evidence to date, on each one of these 3 pathways to performance. And then we're going to take it to the business case and bring in the cost side. So first things first, productivity. Well, it's only taken us about 8 years to get to this point. To, for the first time, provide you with causal evidence for the links between individual well-being, how you feel from day to day, from week to week, the impact of that on how you perform. We all know, and it's part of management mythology, that a happy worker is a more productive worker. But for decades, no researcher or research team has been able to nail causality because there's always something called the chicken and the egg problem, what we call reverse causality. It may well be because the job is going well that you're feeling well, not because you're feeling well that the job is going well. So it took us 8 years, and I'm not going to spend all that time laying out how we nailed the causal inference. But the result is, by working with the largest employer in the United Kingdom, where I work, and they're called British Telecom, or BT for short, we worked with them for a whole period, pulsing their call center employees week after week after week. On Thursday at 4 p.m., they were receiving a little thing like this, a bit like a calendar invite, and they would say how happy they felt that week, and off it went into our database. Now, I'm not recommending that you actually pulse or gauge workplace well-being every week. That's a little over the top. Although once a year is way behind the curve, but once a week would be a little too much. But for the research purposes, we kind of had to. And what we found, once we then started mapping these weekly trends in people's individual workers' well-being, we would map those onto very granular levels of performance, whether it was customer satisfaction coming back, weekly sales, seconds per call, you name it. Well, what we found was a very, very strong relationship, a predictive relationship, a causal relationship between how we feel and how productive they were. And when I say productive, it wasn't just customer satisfaction or more calls. It was the actual combination of all of the good performance leading to more weekly sales for these individuals. So with every change in their well-being, from very unhappy to neutral to happy to very happy, we saw causal, multiple percentage increases in their weekly sales. And what you're seeing here is really a base case for the link between how we feel as individuals and how good we perform. Because once we started zooming in on those kind of tasks that were more requiring social and emotional intelligence, for example, having to deal with a disgruntled customer and retaining their business, or trying to sell more complex packages, the more complex the task was, the steeper the relationship. In other words, the more powerful it was how you felt in that moment in order to be able to do a good job on the other side. And the more you think about it, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir, the more it will be intuitive to you, because you cannot relate to people or be creative or activate your social and emotional intelligence or show any altruism or empathy if you yourself aren't in a good place. And this shows. And in our future of work, this is called FutureWorks, in our future of work, I have, economists don't like to think too much about the future because there's two kinds. Those that know they cannot predict the future, and those that don't know that they cannot predict the future. But I am willing to bet that in our future of work, the tasks that we will all have to be doing will be more complex and will require more social and emotional intelligence because all the rest will be done by machines or ChatGPT or what have you. In other words, the role of workplace well-being, how we feel, will increasingly be important in how it drives our performance. All right, moving on. The second channel or pathway to performance is talent recruitment, attraction. Are you an attractive employer? And my wonderful colleague, former student, but one day he will be well past me, George Ward, who's behind a lot of these wonderful results that you're seeing today, for his PhD thesis at MIT, he leveraged the Indeed platform. And when the Work Wellbeing score, or its predecessor, the Work Happiness score, was being rolled out now 4 years ago, he leveraged the rollout in an A/B type test with no less than 24 million job seekers being randomly assigned to either seeing the Work Wellbeing score when they went on a company page before going onto a job profile versus not seeing it. And what he found was that when workers see what other workers currently at a potential employer for them are reflecting back, they respond behaviorally to that. So he found that good workplaces, above average, became more attractive to these job seekers and vice versa. What does this mean for your companies? Well, it means that if you move, and we've been now verifying this because we've got 4 years of data, when an employer like you moves in terms of work well-being score on the Indeed platform, we see behavioral change in job seekers' behavior, making you a more attractive employer. And these are big percentages. So if you move from the bottom quintile, relatively speaking, to other organizations, to the next quintile, to the following, all the way to the top quintile, for example, you'd be moving and having about 25, 26% more applications coming in. And I'm willing to bet that the extra applications that are coming in because you're a good workplace, and it's shown, are those job seekers you're looking for. Third channel, retention. The most obvious one of them all, the one that we spend a lot of time now preparing, especially for today, a whole new study that I think is pretty darn cool. All the listed companies in the United States And we have so much data thanks to Indeed's crowdsourcing that we now have access or can like for like compare pretty much all the listed companies and well beyond, because there's hundreds of thousands that we can compare, but especially the big ones that tend to be publicly listed. You're seeing them here put into buckets on their average well-being score. So again, ranging from about 2 all the way to 4 on that 1 to 5 scale. On the vertical axis, what you're seeing is the voluntary annual employee turnover rate, something that all of you care a hell of a lot about. Because in the HR space, we know darn well just how costly it is losing your talent on a voluntary basis and having to replace it. Well, what you're seeing here is if the work well-being score that comes back through our crowdsourced measures, i.e. your workplace well-being, is higher, you have a lower voluntary annual turnover of your employees. Seems intuitive, but to see it this strikingly at this scale has never been shown before for so many companies in such a systematic way. And the differences are big. So moving from a work well-being score for your organization of 2 to 4 means about 30% less annual turnover in your staff. Let that sink in. And that's a pathway to performance. Why it actually starts creeping up over time in the bottom line. So we, thanks to the great partnership with Indeed and all the research we've been doing with Indeed and beyond, are starting to map out this extraordinary model of well-being in the workplace where we have a good sense for measurement, measure at a scale never seen before. We're starting to get a good sense of what drives workplace well-being, i.e. how people feel. And I've just shown you for each one of these arrows or dynamics a positive spillover effects onto performance. Raise productivity, better recruiting of talent, and better retention of talent. But here's the kicker. None of these 3 pathways, productivity, talent, recruitment, and retention, by themselves make a business case for workplace well-being. As any CFO who's slightly cynical or skeptical would say, sure, it might be a good thing if my people are happy, but what does it cost to make them happy? And this is where the business case really kicks in. What we need to be able to claim an actual business case is to look at the overarching performance of the organization, not just elements like productivity, retention, and recruitment, and to see that and to evaluate also the cost side. Because only if we look at global performance of the organization do we take into account both the benefits of workplace well-being as well as whatever it may cost the organization to lead an organization where people feel good. And so here, I've obviously kept the best analysis for last. We're going to be showing you something really cool that is starting to get a lot of buzz in the financial newspapers. First of all, what we did, in line with the last analysis you just saw, we took all the publicly listed companies in the US, New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, and that's about 1,800 big companies that we have good workplace well-being data for, and they obviously have to report quarterly financial results in a systematic way. And so we put 1 and 1 together. It wasn't that easy, it took us a while, but we got there in the end. And what you're seeing here is that company work well-being score, crowdsourced through Indeed, on the horizontal axis, running from 1 to 5, but really the range is between 2 and 4. And deciles, these 1,800 companies grouped in deciles, with to the left the worst decile, and their accounting firm value, their profitability, and the actual gross profits in billions of dollars. And there's a very strong correlation. Now, some of you will say, wait a second, correlation ain't causation, and you're obviously right. And one way of going beyond correlation is to start thinking longitudinally. So what you're seeing here is old work well-being score data from when we started way back in mid-2019, and seeing how your people felt back in 2019, is it predictive of 2020 financials, 2021 financials, 2023 financials, 2024 financials? And lo and behold, it does. The predictive power only gradually declines, but even 4 or 5 years out, we still see a very strong well-being as a leading indicator for workplace well-being. Final analysis, because I know you're probably going to, enough for 20 minutes, but the final analysis, bear with me, because this is the one that gets most attention, at least out there in the news and it really drags people in. And it's also the reason why we're so excited about the Work Wellbeing 100. Remember, we've got data for pretty much all US-listed companies. 1,800 of them we have good comparable data for. We looked at their financial performance, but obviously it's a little exciting to then think, wait a second, if there's a business case for workplace well-being, should we not try and invest in that as individual investors or as a large investment management company? And so what you're seeing on the screen is a portfolio, a basic portfolio analysis where we put $1,000 in a portfolio just based on good workplaces, as reported to us by the employees themselves. And so we use the 2020 data to, on January 1st, 2021, build a portfolio of the top 100 out of these 1,800 listed companies we've got data for. And it outperforms the S&P 500, the Russell 3000, and the NASDAQ Composite. We do it again, January 1st, 2022. We leverage the 21 data to update our portfolio and let it run for another year. Lo and behold, in that bear market, we were more resilient in that portfolio. 23 was a very volatile market. Do the same thing. Again, we outperformed. And by about now, especially for this crowd, all of you, we've updated it again. And up until this summer, our portfolio, had we invested back in 2021, that $1,000, it would be $1,533 to be precise, which is 11% greater return than the S&P 500 would. As you can imagine, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal are taking a big interest in writing about this, and the big investment management companies are too, and so should all of we, because this also shows, once again, that workplace well-being is a leading indicator of business performance. All right, nobody can sum this up better than the wonderful LaFawn Davis, whom you will have seen earlier today and might see again this evening when she interviews Trevor Noah. LaFawn says it well: work well-being is how job seekers and employees feel, and how they feel impacts how your company performs. And with me, to join me on stage, to talk a little about this, is a star panel of 3 senior corporate leaders at 3 companies who are at the very top of the Work Wellbeing 100. And when I say the Work Wellbeing 100, it's the top 100 amongst pretty much all the listed companies that we have data for. And they are doing an exceptional job. And in fact, one of the 3 companies that is being represented here with us today is the actual #1. But I'm not going to tell you who it is, because I want you to go to the website for the Work Wellbeing 100 and actually see the list in the ranking of the top 100 companies and see if your company is perhaps part of it or should be part of it in the next few years. So without further ado, I would love to have you join me in warmly welcoming a star panel of 3 corporate leaders who I'll introduce in a second once they're on stage. Thank you. All right, please be seated. Thank you. So first of all, quick introductions. We have on the other end there, Dr. Tamarah Duperval-Brownlee, who's the Chief Health Officer of Accenture. We've got Melissa Holthaus, who is the Vice President in charge of Total Rewards and Operations for H&R Block. And to my immediate right, we've got Maria Tarsia, who's the VP for Total Rewards at IBM. Welcome, and especially congratulations. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, and from all of our hearts, because you should be so proud, because in most cases, when people make a list of best place to work, it's typically because they've submitted the application themselves or paid to play. That's not the case here. These ladies represent companies whose people, behind their back, have told us that they enjoy working there. So well done.
Thank you.
All right, without further ado, Dr. Tam, maybe we shall start with you.
Sure.
Most companies talk a lot about workplace well-being, and every manager is a people manager. But few companies actually make it to the levels of workplace well-being as reported by individuals and workers themselves in the way that your companies do, and Accenture in particular. We also saw earlier on in the conversation when I showed you the data that the reality is that most workers don't feel very happy in their workplaces. Again, you're exceptions to that. So what do you at Accenture do to try and not just talk the talk, but also walk the walk and put this into action?
Thank you, Jan. Hi, everybody. I'm really thrilled to be here to talk about what that looks like at Accenture. And I think there are a few things, although I think there is a magic, that happens with our people. And when you have the best people, I think that are really aligned to a compelling purpose, about bringing human ingenuity and technology together. They're curious people, they care for each other, they're cared for, then I think all the results that you see ends up being manifested. But when I came into the role at Accenture, which is about just a little over 3 years ago, there hadn't been a me before. But it was building on a work that our Chief Leadership and Human Resources Officer had been building on for 10 years prior. And it's really to position Accenture as a human company. We all say that our company's greatest assets, unless you actually make the widgets, are the people, right? And it's true for Accenture, as evidenced by 750,000 people globally. And in that transformation of making our company a truly human company, there was deep investment in thinking about what are the characteristics and mindsets and behaviors that leaders had to have, and making sure that they're walking every day, doing that with easy tools, not hard things, but easy tools. What are the ways that we work? And we're consistently always transforming the ways that we're working so that it can be easier, more efficient, so people are actually using that big brain that they have to do what they are compelled to do it in a purpose. And then lastly is deep investment with no pulling back of services and resources that are tailored for them. That is reflective of cultural humility, cultural competency. We believe in having a lens of equity, especially globally. If it's good for us here in the US, it's good for our colleagues in Japan, and the like. So I think that's it. And we have some really exemplary leaders that do this regularly, that are vulnerable and sharing about, for example, when they haven't been happy, that their stress has been high, or vulnerability with mental health that allows, I think, an opportunity for everybody to feel like, oh, I belong, I'm seen, by my leader, and the like. So I think those are some of the things that helped.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. There's a lot there that resonates also with the results we've seen. Maybe, Dr. Tam, Melissa, both of you, in terms of measurement, I have to say, obviously, my bread and butter, how do you measure workplace well-being? Which indicators do you tend to gauge or capture, and which ones do you kind of prefer or do you find most meaningful in your own thinking at both H&R Block and Accenture?
I think I'll take this one first.
Please go first.
But first, just want to say thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you and this great panel and with all of you today. This is something near and dear to my heart, and so I love talking about it. So for H&R Block, we really look at 3 different things, really. We look at our associate engagement survey, we look at our health and well-being metrics through some of our programs, and then we just do more ad hoc sentiment surveys with our associates to just get a gauge on how they're feeling overall well-being, including mental well-being and financial well-being. Okay. And so those 2 combined, the health program metrics along with the associate engagement survey results really give us a good picture of how our associates are feeling. So for the AES survey, we're asking about how happy are you? Do you have purpose at work? Do you feel like you belong? What's your work-life balance like? Exactly. And so that gives us a good feel for their workplace well-being feeling. And what we found is we started this journey about 3.5 years ago, that those scores have gone up about 4%, and on average over 80% for those. So we're seeing some of the impact of that. Also, our health and well-being metrics have increased as well too. So we've really invested in mental health, supporting the whole person, making sure we have a lot of our efforts support the whole person, that they feel authentic and that they can bring their full self to work. So all of those combined have helped us improve. Those have all been improving over the last 3.5 years. I would love to take total credit for it. I'm sure there's lots of things that have contributed to this, but our stock price has gone up 220% over the same time period. So it's very cool.
Can we arrest our case right there?
Yeah.
Amazing, well done. And also for us, the Oxford team, the Indeed team who's behind this, to see that your internal metrics have gone up in the last 2 years, and to see in our crowdsourced, so the inside out and the outside in, the internal and the external validity here is really interesting and huge. I didn't know this, so because the thing about these surveys that you all run, they kind of stay internally. They serve your own purposes and they're not made public. And it's nice to see the publicly available data match with what you're seeing internally and vice versa, of course. Dr. Tam, you run such a large organization. What measures are you trying to capture of these? What is it, 600,000?
Well, I tell you, Jan, I wish I'd met you 3 years ago. We would have definitely level set the metrics that we're following. But similar metrics that Melissa mentioned, we're doing the same. The way I think about it, I think it's the scientist in me, I like to think about what the matrix is. So certainly there is our employee surveys, there's a lot of sentiment data that we're capturing. In the past little over a year, we started being a bit more granular because we are very much focused on health and well-being. So it's financial health, it's physical health, and mental and emotional health, because our study has shown, like, if you focus on those three in addition to belonging, skills, that you're unlocking most of the potential of a person if you're able to optimize those dimensions. So we ask about that. And then I couldn't help but bringing my clinical self. It's like, let's see what's happening. What are people actually experiencing in health? What are the conditions that they're experiencing? What are our claims data showing in that regard? So it's that too, which we started to lean into. In addition, how present are people at work? Or are they actually not showing up? Are they not feeling well enough to show up? And we're just in that journey now to start drawing what those correlations are looking like. But I think, like Melissa, we're definitely showing that you invest in those areas, you start unpacking them, very transparently addressing them, then you see a lot of movement upward, both in company performance as well as person performance.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You're here. Thank you. Quick follow-up still for Melissa, and then we'll get to Maria with some interesting questions. You already mentioned the business performance actually improving, or at least stock-wise, which then obviously reflects, I guess, the underlying financials. I was talking about these pathways, especially retention and recruitment. Have you seen action there as well? The fact that you've seen internal workplace well-being metrics go up, externally we've picked it up too. Do you see that? Do you become a more attractive employer as a result?
Yeah, so when we started this journey about 3 years ago or so, we really focused on 3 areas. So one was just the benefits that we offer. We want to make sure that we're supporting the whole self and our associates' families. We have what we call a connected culture, and it's really grounded in caring for our associates, for the clients and the communities that we serve, and that's a kind of a common thread throughout how we work together. And then third is called Way We Work, and it's really a playbook on how we work together as an organization with the goal of being more effective, more efficient, and honestly helping work-life balance. So all of those combined, we talk a lot in our recruiting process. We promote it on our website. We talk with candidates about it. And what we found is that it's resonating with them. It's attracting them to us. 4 out of 5 say that our flexible work schedule, that includes a reboot week where we have off a full week, which is delightful if you don't do it. It's a delightful thing to have. 4 out of 5 are saying that's one of the primary reasons they chose us. And 1 out of 5 are saying our benefits are one of the reasons that they've chosen us, which 1 out of 5 doesn't sound great, but when you're in benefits, it never gets the top 5. And so we felt really good that we're making an impact on attracting candidates to us. And then on the flip side too, we're learning that it's helping us with retention. Over the last few years, we've gone from 89% to 93% retention right now. So it's also helping to encourage our associates to stay because we feel like their workplace well-being is improved.
Hear, hear. Amazing. We studied this for the past decade, just the data. Feels like being in a bit of a matrix from time to time. But to hear it actually work on the ground really warms my heart, and I hope it does yours too. Anyway, Maria.
Yes.
Trick question for you, the most difficult one. But the one on responsibility. And I think we're all kind of dealing with it. When I speak with organizations, I hear it too. Where does well-being really sit? Because it's individual. Is it HR? Is it the senior, like it's chief exec? Is it shared? In what ways? How is it done at IBM?
Yeah. So I'm thrilled to be here, and your research has been fascinating, and well-being is a passion of mine for our employees. So I definitely believe this is a shared responsibility. When I think about, and shared across our leaders and managers, across HR and our employees. From a leader and manager perspective, they're responsible for really creating that positive work environment, for creating those cultures of appreciation, of feedback, of inclusion, and that's such an important component to all of this and everything that you shared from a total workplace well-being. And it's important to remember, though, that there are also individuals that are consuming the well-being offerings. And so from that, they can actually then share their experiences and be able to role model and be champions of the offerings that are out there. And similar to my colleagues, we have a culture where we talk about it. We talk about mental health. We talk about the impacts of things that are happening in the world, of the workplace. We share information. And really, it's our leaders and managers that are doing that because they're working with employees on a day-to-day basis. They're providing feedback. They're having those conversations. They're ensuring that people feel safe and that they belong and that they're achieving the objectives that they want. The other component is HR, so absolutely, HR functions. I don't think it's not just total rewards or benefits. It encompasses talent, lots of the different functions, because if you think about the holistic piece, you've got learning, you've got recognition, you've got the well-being benefits. So HR, in my view, is responsible for creating the programs and the tools and the resources to really empower employees and to empower our managers and leaders. And then ultimately, it's really the individuals. So employees from an individual basis have to, partake and utilize the offerings that are out there. And we can do lots of things to have champions and have that open culture and environment. But employees have to feel like there's a benefit to it, that they see the value, and that it's something that they can use that will help them.
Let me drill a bit deeper on you talk about offerings, benefits, interventions, perhaps more structural in nature. What would you recommend our wonderful colleagues in the audience here in terms of trying to raise workplace well-being? Which things you've seen, this has really been picked up, this has helped? Anything in particular?
Yeah.
Any examples?
I think I'll answer it in two ways. So one, I think just having an open culture of conversation and being, having leaders and managers that really care about their teams. If you were in a session a little bit earlier today, Taylor, talked about well-being and that sense of belonging. You had, a lot of that in your presentation as well. And I think that's such an important part that, managers have that day-to-day contact. And to me, that's one of the most important things of how you outreach to employees. The other thing I would just say is, advice on everybody's at different points of a journey on well-being, workplace well-being, encompassing all of the components that you've been researching is a broad, set of potential things to try to tackle. I think, my suggestion would be think about a vision or objectives that you want to achieve that you think are going to be really impactful, and have the conversations with your employees around what they think you're missing, and what they think will actually be the most helpful, and then that'll help to inform your vision. And ultimately, you want something you can measure, because if you can't measure it, then you don't actually know if it's achieving what you want it to.
If you can't measure it, you don't treasure it. If it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed and done, et cetera. There's a lot of variations on that, but I see, and needless to say, couldn't agree more as an empiricist. Back to Melissa. We're going to slowly make our way back to talk to Tam. But Melissa, at H&R Block, what strategies, initiatives have you undertaken or seen in action that have worked and that you might want to share, and any evolutions in those as well?
Yeah. So 3 kind of main things that we've worked on that we think have helped move the needle. And one is interesting because of your question around who's responsible for it. So we actually have all of our people leaders sign what we call a connected leadership pledge. And we literally have them physically sign it. But what it talks about is that as a leader, it's a privilege and a responsibility. And so they have to commit to developing themselves and others, to talking about purpose. We start a lot of our meetings with purpose. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? It's about work-life well-being and work-life balance. So we have actually just leaders pledge that they'll help commit to continuing that well-being culture as part of their role as a leader. We've invested a lot in our benefit programs, and so we have things for caregivers, caregiver support, paid caregiver leave, mental health support, neurodiversity support, a lot of things that hopefully help the whole person and their well-being. But I also recognize too that not everybody can get investment dollars. We have certainly been in a position where we can't. So things that you can do without a lot of investment that can still create a culture of well-being and support. For instance, we have mental well-being ambassadors who are just a friendly face and voice in the organization to help direct people to resources. Any type of training you can do. We have belonging groups. We do things to come together in meaningful ways so that we can share space and time together. So although you may not have the investment, there's a lot of ways that you can create that culture.
Absolutely. Dr. Tam, I see you nodding along in full agreement. Say a bit more. How do you, well, maybe if you really are keen, interventions or actions or strategies that you've undertaken that you may want to share, or also how do you see this evolving, sort of workplace well-being and the actions around that within Accenture? And is it moving from a focus on benefits to more sort of holistic cultural elements? Anyway, so what are you working on, and where do you see this moving, workplace well-being within Accenture?
Awesome. I think I could talk about this for a long time. I was nodding vigorously when Melissa was sharing about their activations, and it made me think about the resource that you all have, that we have in abundance with 750,000 people, is the people, and just how powerful the opportunity of connection and support, even if it happens in a virtual setting, for each other can be. There is a community of mental health allies for which Accenture has been recognized. The founder of that program is actually sitting here in the audience, and we now have about 23,000 mental health allies throughout the world that have been trained in mental health first aid, suicide awareness prevention, and are very keenly aware of the myriad of services, resources, benefits, programs, apps, all the things that we've invested in, but also put it in a place where people can find it. I mean, if there's anything that just made my brain seize when I first came to the organization, it's like, you have so much stuff, this is amazing. How do you find it? And one of the things we did was to help create a hub, that's just a simple QR code, and there's a AI-driven bot that actually helps you to find the thing that you're looking for. Is it mental health resources? Is it caregiving? Is it more new neurodiverse resources for yourself or your kids? It's a game changer, commoditize, I think, the wealth in building the culture of well-being, and then make it easy to find when you have it. That's it, the future of well-being. Because we're near the end.
Yes.
It's less about services and resources, and we've always said that. I think the next frontier for the space of well-being is doubling down on how, especially with all the crisis that we've experienced over the past 4 or 5 years, how do we continue to do the transformation that we're all doing in our organizations, but leaders can still be mindful about people, that we can have ways of working that doesn't make people feel like their jobs are obsolete, but optimized and more efficient, and that they still matter, and they have purpose and joy and curiosity in doing that. I think that's going to be the secret sauce of well-being. Still the services, because you need it, but I think it's that, focusing on those areas.
Thank you, Dr. Tam, for those astute observations. We're going to be wrapping up. Before we give a warm applause to these 3 amazing leaders, before we do so, I want to share with you one slide with some key resources the Indeed team and us have prepared for you. If you want to find out a bit more about your work well-being score, whether you've made it onto the top 100 list like these wonderful companies have, Whether you want to find out a bit more about the Work Wellbeing Playbook, which is a list of actions and interventions that are actually proven to have had an effect, some of which have been illustrated by the discussion here, and there's more, by all means, check out the QR code for those resources. And on the other side of that slide is a book that's coming out that brings together, published by Harvard Business Press soonish, that brings together everything you've seen and more today. So hopefully these resources will be helpful to you in your journey towards a future of work and well-being. And with that, please join me in thanking Dr. Tam, Melissa, and Maria. Thank you.
Thank you.